The game that changed everything. The Deadwood Saloon was alive that evening, more alive than most nights. The lamps along the walls burned low, casting yellow light through the haze of smoke, while the clatter of glasses and laughter blended with the creak of boots on the rough floorboards. Cowboys, miners, drifters, men from all corners of the frontier crowded inside, chasing luck in cards, women, and whiskey. The piano in the corner thumped out a tune while a fiddler tried to keep in step. Every man seemed determined to forget the loneliness of the Black Hills for a few hours. At a table near the far end, Ethan Cole sat with his hat tipped low, eyes shadowed, and a quiet air that set him apart. He wasn't the type to laugh loudly or slam his fist on the table like the others. His presence was calm, steady, like the eye of a storm. Ethan was a cowboy by trade, a drifter by necessity, and a loner by choice. At least, that's what he told himself. In truth, loneliness clung to him like a second skin. He had buried a wife and unborn child years back, and since then, he carried the weight of silence wherever he went. Cards weren't about winning or losing, they were about passing the hours without drowning in memories. The dealer shuffled. The cards slid across the table with the soft, familiar hiss of pasteboard. Ethan glanced at his hand, unreadable as always. Across from him sat Samuel Fletcher, a heavy-set miner with greasy hair and a mouth that ran as fast as his temper. Fletcher had already had too much whiskey. His cheeks were red, his eyes wild. He'd been losing for hours, but stubbornness, or maybe pride, kept him in the game. "You got no luck tonight, Fletcher," one of the men at the table jeered. "Luck," Fletcher barked back. "Luck's for fools. I've got plenty left to play." He shoved a handful of coins into the pot, then slapped down a silver pocket watch, then finally leaned back with a drunken grin. "All in." The dealer raised an eyebrow. "That it?" But Fletcher wasn't done. He waved his hand toward the back of the saloon. From the shadows, 3 girls were pushed forward by a thin, sour-faced man. The saloon grew quiet. The girls couldn't have been older than their late teens. They were Chinese, their hair glossy black, their eyes lowered to the floor. Their clothes were plain and threadbare, dust clinging to the hems. Their cheeks carried faint bruises, their hands calloused. "Throwin' them in, too," Fletcher slurred. 3 Chinamen girls. Worth more than all this coin put together. Got 'em cheap off a foreman at the rail camp. They work hard, don't talk much. Cook, clean, whatever else a man wants. Hell, they'll pay for themselves in a week. The saloon erupted in noise. Some laughed, others whistled, others shouted crude suggestions. Ethan's jaw tightened. His eyes, hidden beneath the brim of his hat, flicked toward the girls. They stood huddled together, trembling, clinging to one another. Their fear was plain. They knew what it meant to be wagered like livestock. Ethan's hand flexed over his cards. His instincts screamed to stand, to draw his Colt and put an end to this. But a single man against 30 drunks in a saloon was suicide. He forced himself to stay still. "Don't reckon the dealer'll take people as stakes," someone muttered. But the dealer shrugged. "A wager's a wager." His tone was bored, as though 3 human lives were no more than another coin on the pile. Ethan said nothing. He stared at his hand. 3 kings. If the right card turned, he had a chance. Fletcher laughed, slamming his cards down. 2 queens and 2 jacks. Full house. Read 'em and weep. The saloon hooped. Fletcher puffed out his chest, already reaching for the pot. But Ethan's voice cut through the din, quiet, steady. "Not so fast." He laid down his hand. 3 kings, 2 aces. A stronger full house. The table went silent. Fletcher's grin crumbled. "No," he muttered. "No, you." The dealer tapped the cards with finality. "Pot goes to Ethan Cole." The saloon broke into roars, half jeering, half cheering. Some clapped Ethan on the back. Others mocked Fletcher mercilessly. Fletcher shoved back from the table, his chair scraping the floor. His face twisted in rage. "You cheated me, Cole." Ethan rose slowly, towering over the miner, his face unreadable. His hand rested near his revolver, though he hadn't drawn it. "You lost fair." The miner spat on the floor. "Take your damn pot. Take them too." He shoved a hand toward the three girls, who flinched as if struck. "Hope you know what you're doin', cowboy. Ain't no good come from talkin' in strays." The laughter in the room rose again, cruel and mocking. Ethan ignored it. He gathered his winnings, but his eyes never left the girls. They stood trembling, their gazes flicking between him and the door, as though unsure if freedom lay ahead or another prison. He stepped toward them, slow, careful. He lowered his voice. "You're safe now." They didn't understand the words, not fully. But something in his tone made them hesitate. Ethan shrugged off his long coat and draped it over the shoulders of the smallest girl, who clutched it tightly around herself. He gestured toward the door. "Come on." They followed. The saloon roared behind them, men laughing, shouting crude jokes, but Ethan didn't look back. He pushed open the swinging doors, and the night air hit them, cold, sharp, clean compared to the smoke inside. The girls huddled close as Ethan untied his horse and mule. He loaded his gear, then offered a hand to help them up. They climbed uncertainly, their movements hesitant, like wild creatures and used to kindness. Once mounted, Ethan swung into the saddle and looked back at the glow of the saloon. The noise spilled into the street, but it no longer mattered. He had won more than coins that night. He had won 3 lives, and though he didn't know how or why, he felt a weight settle in his chest, not a burden, but a purpose. As the horse started forward, Ethan glanced at the girls. "You don't belong to me," he said softly, though he doubted they understood. "No man owns you. Not anymore." The road stretched dark and uncertain ahead. But for the first time in years, Ethan felt something other than emptiness. Something like the beginning of change. Trust carved from silence. The first night after leaving Deadwood was colder than the girls expected. They sat together near the campfire, their small frames pressed close for warmth, eyes flicking toward Ethan with wariness. Ethan busied himself setting up camp. He'd built a fire with practiced ease, roasted strips of rabbit over the flames, and checked the horse's tack twice before sitting down with his plate. He didn't speak much. He never did. The girls whispered in a language he didn't understand. Their voices were hushed, sharp at times, soft at others, as though they debated what to make of him. Ethan caught none of it, though he could guess. What does this man want? Why hasn't he beaten us? Why hasn't he sold us already? He chewed slowly, watching the sparks from the fire lift into the night sky. Finally, he cleared his throat. "My name's Ethan," he said. His voice sounded rough even to his own ears. He wasn't used to saying it aloud. "Ethan Cole." The eldest girl lifted her chin slightly. She was no older than 20, maybe less, but her dark eyes held a wary intelligence. She hesitated, then pressed her hand to her chest. "May," she said, slowly, as though testing if he would mock her. The second girl, smaller, softer, with a timid smile hidden beneath her nerves, whispered, "Lawn." And the youngest, who had clutched his coat since the saloon, drew it tighter around her shoulders. She hesitated, then spoke so softly he barely caught it, "Show." Ethan nodded. "May, Lon, Show." He repeated their names carefully, not wanting to twist them. They exchanged uncertain glances, surprised he'd bothered. For a while, silence fell again, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the night sounds of the prairie. Somewhere an owl hooted. When the girls had eaten, Ethan stood and spread out his bedroll near the edge of camp, giving them the fire. He laid his revolver within reach, as always. "Sleep," he said gently. "You'll need it." They didn't move for a long time. But eventually, exhaustion won. Huddled together beneath his coat and the thin blankets he offered, they drifted into uneasy sleep. Ethan remained awake long after, staring at the stars, wondering what in God's name he was doing. The trail tested them. By day, the sun beat down mercilessly. The girls were unused to long rides, their hands blistering from holding reins, their backs aching from the saddle. Ethan slowed his pace for them, though it cost him time. He hunted when he could, bringing down deer or rabbits, showing the girls how to skin and cook them. At first, they recoiled, horrified by the blood. But hunger forced their hands, and soon May watched with sharp attention, learning faster than Ethan expected. Lon gathered herbs she recognized along the way, showing a surprising knowledge of plants. She tried to explain their uses with broken English and gestures. When one of Ethan's cuts festered, she mashed leaves into a poultice that eased the swelling. Shio, the youngest, remained closest to Ethan. She often trailed at his side, her eyes wide, questions bubbling in her native tongue though he couldn't understand. Once, she laughed when he stumbled trying to copy her words. It was the first sound of joy he had heard from her. Each day chipped away at the wall between them. One evening, after a long ride, May approached him while he whittled a piece of wood near the fire. Her English was halting, her accent heavy. "Why you help?" she asked. Her brows knit, as though the question itself hurt. "No money. No reason." Ethan's knife paused. He stared into the fire for a long while. Memories rose unbidden, his wife coughing, the fever stealing her breath, the tiny grave he had dug with his own hands. "Because no one deserves chains," he said finally. His voice was low, almost to himself. May studied him for a long moment, as though trying to decide if the words were truth or another mask. Then she nodded once, curtly, and walked back to the others. But the frontier was never kind for long. One afternoon, as they crossed a wide stretch of prairie, dust rose on the horizon. A group of mounted men appeared, hard-eyed ranchers armed with rifles. They rode straight for Ethan's small caravan, cutting off his path. Their leader, a tall man with a scar down his cheek, spat a wad of tobacco into the dirt. His gaze slid to the girls immediately, lingering too long. "Well, well," he drawled. "What we got here? Cowboy's got himself some company." Ethan sat straight in the saddle, his hand brushing his revolver. "Just passin' through." The rancher smirked. "They yours?" "They're not anyone's." The men laughed cruelly. One leaned forward in his saddle, eyeing the girls. "Tell you what, Cowboy, we'll take him off your hands. Pay you good money. Save you the trouble." May stiffened. Shio whimpered softly. Lan's face went pale. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Not for sale." His voice carried steel. The leader's smile thinned. "Careful, friend. A man alone out here can disappear mighty easy." The standoff stretched long. Dust swirled in the hot wind. Ethan's fingers hovered inches from his revolver, his whole body coiled. Finally, the leader spat again and jerked his reins. "Ain't worth the fight. Come on, boys." The riders wheeled their horses and thundered off, but not without throwing filthy words over their shoulders. Only when they disappeared over the rise did Ethan let out the breath he'd been holding. That night, the girls stayed closer to him than ever, fear lingering in their eyes. As he kept watch by the fire, he realized a truth that sank deep into his bones. Protecting them wasn't temporary. Their lives were tied to his now, not by cards, not by chance, but by choice. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt a purpose stronger than survival. A family forged in the west. The valley that held Ethan's ranch opened before them like a secret. The hills curved into soft slopes, the grass waving in the breeze, and beyond lay a cluster of weathered buildings, a cabin with a sagging roof, a barn missing half its boards, and corrals long abandoned. It wasn't much, but it was home. The girls looked around uncertainly as Ethan dismounted. To their eyes, the land was wild and empty, filled with silence instead of neighbors, mountains instead of crowded streets. May studied the cabin with her sharp, guarded gaze. Lon lingered near the mule, smoothing its mane nervously, and little Shio whispered something in her own tongue, clutching Ethan's coat like she feared the ground itself would swallow her. Ethan took a deep breath. "It's not fancy," he admitted, "but it'll keep the rain off." They didn't understand every word, but they understood the way he spoke it, without pride, without apology, only honesty. He pushed the cabin door open, the hinges creaking. Inside, dust hung thick in the air. A few chairs sat broken, the hearth cold, cobwebs in every corner. Ethan set his hat on a peg, then rolled up his sleeves. "First things first," he said, grabbing a broom. "We make it livable." The work was endless, but it bound them together. Ethan chopped wood for the hearth while May swept the floors until they shone. Lon, with her love for herbs, gathered wild plants near the creek and set them drying on the windowsill. Shio busied herself with small touches, braiding flowers into garlands to hang by the door, arranging pebbles into neat patterns by the hearth. At night, they cooked together. Ethan showed them how to make cornbread. They showed him how to make broth from roots and dried mushrooms. Though words often failed, gestures filled the gap. Slowly, laughter began to replace silence. The ranch came alive again. But the world outside didn't forget. Word spread quickly that Ethan Cole was sheltering 3 Chinese girls. Some neighbors sneered, calling him a fool. Others made cruel jokes at his expense. A few even came riding up, offering to buy them outright. Ethan sent them away, hand resting on his revolver until they were out of sight. "People don't like what they don't understand," Ethan told May one evening as they sat by the fire. May's eyes burned. "They hate us because we look different." Ethan nodded slowly. "That, and because men like having someone beneath them. Makes them feel taller." She was silent for a long time. Then softly she said, "But you don't." He looked at her, but she didn't meet his gaze. She bent over her sewing, her needle flashing in the firelight. Yet he saw the faintest curve of a smile on her lips. Trouble came in spring. A gang of drifters, 5 men rough from whiskey and greed, rode onto the ranch while Ethan was mending fence. They dismounted boldly, rifles slung across their backs. The leader, a wiry man with cruel eyes, called out, "Heard you're keepin' 3 little Chinamen here, Cole. Ain't neighborly to hog what oughta be shared." Ethan's blood ran cold. He saw May at the cabin door, Lon behind her, Shio clutching her hand. "Turn around," Ethan said flatly. His voice carried no room for argument. The men laughed. One spat. "We'll be talking them girls. You can keep your busted ranch." Ethan's revolver was out before the man finished speaking. The shot cracked through the valley, kicking up dust at the leader's boots. The gang froze, staring at Ethan's steady hand. "I don't give warnings twice," he said. Something in his eyes convinced them. They mounted up again, cursing and spitting, but they left. When silence returned, Ethan holstered his gun slowly. He turned to see the girls staring at him, not with fear this time, but with trust. Even Shio, trembling, managed a small nod of gratitude. That night, May placed a hand on his arm. "You protect us, like family." Ethan swallowed hard. "You are family." The words slipped out before he thought them through. But as soon as he said them, he knew they were true. Seasons passed. The ranch grew stronger under their hands. The barn was rebuilt, the fields planted. Land's herb garden flourished, bringing medicine and flavors Ethan had never known. Xiao learned to ride, her laughter ringing across the hills as she raced the wind. May, ever steady, became Ethan's right hand in running the ranch. The loneliness that once haunted him began to fade. Evenings by the fire were filled with stories, some in English, some in Chinese, many in broken mixtures of both, but all of them warm. One evening, May sat beside him, her voice quiet. "When you win us, I think we die soon. But now, we live." Ethan looked at her, the firelight flickering across her face. "You gave me life too, May. I was already dead inside before that night." She held his gaze, unflinching. In her eyes, he saw strength, sorrow, and something else, something he hadn't dared hope for. Maybe, in time, love could grow here too. Years later, travelers passing through the valley told stories of the cowboy and the 3 Chinese women who turned a broken ranch into a haven. They said no one dared trouble them again, for everyone knew Ethan Cole's rifle never missed, and his heart was bound to the family he had chosen. And in the quiet of that valley, laughter rose where once there had been only silence. The lonely cowboy who had walked into a smoky saloon had won a hand of cards that night, but in truth, he hadn't won at all. He had been given a gift, one that no money could measure. A family, a home, and a life worth living again.